What's up guys, you Gypsy back here today for NPL Week 4. We're going up against a formidable opponent in Monotooi. We're both currently 2-1 at this point in the season, so obviously we're both looking to catch this Week 4 win, and Mono's no slouch. He is obviously, I'm sure all of you guys know Mono, he's a pretty accomplished player in the format, and he has a very threatening team, as you can see up here. So it's a team that Mono really is comfortable with stuff like Megalopani, Tyranitar, plus stuff like Gliscor, which is a mon that I've seen him used quite a lot. He's using Mimikyu really well this season. I think a lot of people kind of underestimated, they sort of looked at his draft earlier on in the season and were complaining that it was far too physically offensively based. It didn't have enough diversity when it came to special attackers, but I really disagree that that's a negative, in the sense that stuff like Mimikyu and Lopunny and Tyranitar, they all work in tandem to weaken one another's checks. So this is something that a lot of people kind of forget about. They instantly look at his team and just assume that, you just slap on like physical walls and reflect all this sort of stuff. But in the hands of a smart player like Mono, those mons can be used together to really weaken down the main physical walls of an opponent's team and allow for either Lop or Mimikyu to clean up. That is definitely something I'm going to have to be careful of this week. Even with a team like mine, I have stuff like Landorus T, Celesteela, Suicune, Quillfish, all pretty solid physically defensive mons with the right investment. However, correctly used Lopunny, as well as Mimikyu and Tyranitar, like that offensive core just can really dent respective defensive checks of mine, unless I am to bring like all four of them and bring like a really fat team. So that's definitely something I just wanted to touch upon before we jump into it. And before we do jump into this team builder, prior to this week, Mono had Haxorus on his team over Kyurem, but he actually made a free agency swap and he has obtained Kyurem, so that gives his team, that was a really smart trade in my opinion. It gives his team a better special dragon. Obviously Haxorus is nice, but he's really stacking the physically offensive side there, and I think Kyurem just is a really nice balance for his team, and it's a massive threat to mine. At this point in time, it's an enormous threat to my team, and he can spam Ice Beam pretty freely, unless I bring some of my water types, or perhaps like a really fat Hariyama or something like a really bulky Ordino. But I am expecting my opponent to bring that this week, and I think it could be a really kind of interesting mon depending on the set, which I'm going to go into later, kind of thinking, judging just by the sets that we have brought this week. But getting into the team, as you see his team on the right, he does have Lopunny, Toxapex, Tyranitar, Gliscor, Ferrothorn. He's got the Mimikyu, the Ryuni, the Kyurem, the Sandslash, the Scyther, and the Manectric. So pretty interesting team, as I have discussed. Very physically based, but stuff like Reuniclus and Kyurem, like I mentioned earlier, are enormous threats to my team. Reuniclus, a Carmine variant, which could definitely come, can be an amazing win con from his side. That's something I'm definitely going to have to watch out for. I think Reuniclus is one of his best methods of checking Diancie, unless he does want to run like a Shed Shell Toxapex or a Shed Shell, maybe Anticipation Ferrothorn to scout for HP Fire on Diancie. But yeah, definitely I think Reuniclus could come to manage Diancie in that sense. Like an Assault Vest variant may be coming, but I do think Carmine is his best set this week. Anyway, running over the team that we are opting for this week, as you guys can see, we are rocking a Double Dance Landorus. Originally, I was kind of thinking of Stealth Rock on this set, but then I realized Double Dance kind of murks his team. He does have the Gliscor, but at +2, Supersonic Sky Strike absolutely obliterates Max Defense Gliscor, just sends it to another dimension. So we are bringing this set. If I get to +2 and I do manage to get Hazards up with my other mons, this thing can really just basically sweep his team. Intimidate is a really nice buffer for stuff like Lop, Tyranitar, Mimikyu, as I mentioned earlier. And the fact that I have opted to run Scarf 2 weeks in a row, and I think the first week I ran a kind of bulkier offensive variant. I don't know if he'll necessarily expect it, but Mono's a smart builder. He'll definitely be prepping for the possibility of a Z Landorus, especially if you face it in mocks. That's definitely a set that could really dent his team. Z Flyer is obviously nice, as I mentioned, for the Gliscor, but it also helps me in a pinch versus a boosting Reuniclus that's getting out of control. I can boost up on that. Due to my defense investment here, I can take Psyshock's better from Reuniclus, and Psyshock is the set I expect him to bring if he does bring Carmine, just because it does allow him to beat a potential Carmine Suicune, and can help him versus my Ordino if I'm specially defensive, or something in that nature. I do expect him to run like Ice Punch on Lopunny for this Landorus, so having that defensive investment is pretty nice. Allows me to take a hit easier from a Lopunny. This Landorus is pretty simple, nothing too crazy about the spread of this set, but it is pretty nice. This speed is just to outrun Banded Jolly Tita, or just a Jolly Tita in general. Didn't really feel it was worth creeping anything else in this current matchup because he's likely to run max speed on his Kyurem, or enough speed to outspeed my a max speed Jolly Lando. I think he will certainly run that amount of speed, and I don't see him running anything else fast. If he runs fast Gliscor, he's going to run fast for Landorus, or he's going to run a slower Gliscor. So I didn't feel like it was necessary here. And certain variants of Gliscor can just straight up beat Double Dance Landorus anyway, as we will go into later on. But that is going to be Landorus for this week. Then we have the second one on the team, and perhaps the most effective in this matchup, depending on what he may bring. Now, you may think this sub-protect Carmine Suicune is quite a strange bring, considering he does have Ferrothorn, stuff like Toxapex, even stuff like Reuniclus, as well as Kyurem. Look, it kind of doesn't really make sense why I bring this set, but this set, as I'm sure a few of you will know what sub-protect Carmine Kun can do, this set with a sub-up has a lot of fun versus this team. Sub-protect allows me to stall out stuff like Power Whips from his Ferrothorn. I can beat a Toxapex 1v1 in the long run if I need to, although I'm not going to want to waste too many Scalds on Toxapex unless I don't have to, but if I am forced to, I can wear down the Toxapex with Scalds, get a burn, and switch accordingly. But this Suicune is definitely a win con. With a sub-up, I don't fear a Toxic from a fast sub-Toxic Kyurem, which I think is also a pretty solid bring versus my team. I also don't fear stuff like Lopunny, because if I've got a sub-up, I can Scald when he has to come in to revenge me. Obviously, Encore Lop could be a thing, but we can scout for that. This speed again allows me to outspeed Jelly Tita, so if I do have Carmine's up, I can allow my sub not to get broken by knocking him out with Scald. If he's weakened and I've got a few Carmines up and he's in range, that is. So yeah, this Suicune Protect is pretty obnoxious, but pretty nice in this matchup. It's going to allow me to scout any banded or choiced mons on his team, stuff like Tita maybe, or even like a choiced Manectric. If he's like Volt Switch or something like that, I can protect if he wants to lock himself to HP Ice. I know I can stay in fire for Scald, if not I can just switch to Lando. And yeah, this set doesn't seem like it would do too much on paper, but trust me, it has potential in this matchup. Anyone who's faced a Vinekun or used Vinekun before knows what this thing is capable of. And in conjunction with the next mon on my team, which actually just helps this mon strats, it's going to perform quite well in my opinion. So the next mon we have is my Suicune. Now the GOAT, we are here today rocking max defense. No reason to run any Spadef because Ice Beam murks me regardless from Kyurem. That thing is so strong. But with Rocky Helmet, I function as a somewhat decent check to Lopunny. I got Spikes and T-Spikes. T-Spikes here, as I mentioned, this is what I was implying earlier when I was discussing Kun. Basically, T-Spikes plus Vinekun is very difficult for opponents to overcome. Another great thing about the Suicune set, before I go on too much, is that I do beat Carmine Psyshock Reuniclus 1v1 due to pressure stalling out Psyshock's PP. Essentially, Psyshock only has 8 PP versus Suicune, so I can sub-protect up on that with lefties. I do gain back. I am able to sub up multiple times. I can protect stall and sub-stall his Psyshocks, which makes this Suicune an even nicer win con. But ensuring I get T-Spikes up versus this team allows my Kun to get up potentially more subs versus stuff like a Kyurem that needs to roost up or else risks dying to Toxic. So that does help my Kun in getting another sub. Eases prediction with the Toxic, with the Protect sub mind games, as is often seen on these sort of teams with Suicune. Spikes is really nice because the majority of his team is grounded, I don't expect hazard removal from him, as he's limited to stuff like non-toxic orb, defog from Gliscor, as well as Scyther. So I don't really see removal coming. If anything, he may want to stack me, which is partly why I do have Taunt on this Coolfish, as well as my my Hydreigon. We'll get into that in a bit. Waterfall here, obligatory way to break stuff like Lop on his sub, allows me to actually deal damage to Lop. I contemplated going for status, but for like non-attacking moves, but having Waterfall is pretty clutch. Allows me to break Mimikyu's sub, which is important. It's Disguise, and yeah, getting T-Spikes up and Spikes is going to be this mon's main job, as well as switching into Lop, which is obviously important because Lop is a menace to my team. Then we have Calamite, the Hydreigon. So this is a mon that I'm pretty proud of. Contemplated a lot about this set, but basically you see a Life Orb with like timid 36 attack, or calculated. Trust me. This mon is going to be able to do a lot of work in this matchup. Hydreigon sits at a really nice speed tier this game, outspeeding stuff like the Kyurem and the Mimikyu, which is really nice. Obviously I don't outspeed the Lop just mercs my team speed wise, but this set is really nice. Basically I can beat stuff like Toxapex with Taunt Dark Pulse. I can beat a roosting Gliscor. This is also really important for the potential of Baton Pass Gliscor, which could be a threat to my team. You see me with his bulk here. Basically this investment allows me not to be too echoed by the slowest of the slowest Ferrothorn's Gyros, which is important. I can roost all his Gyro Balls, meaning that he's going to have a harder time taking on my Hydreigon. With Taunt, I can stop him from setting up any hazards or leeching me, which is really nice. And that's going to make my Suicune's life a lot easier versus the Ferrothorn if I can stall him out of PP as well. I don't have to sub up as much, having my subs broken by Power Whip if Hydreigon has stalled some of those out. So Taunt and Dark Pulse is really nice for that regard. Superpower here with this investment allows me to Oko max HP T-Tar with the Life Orb from full, which is really solid, because T-Tar is a massive threat to my team. So unless he's like triple T-Tar, which doesn't make a lot of sense versus my team, he's gonna get bopped. Landorus is a big threat to his team, so he may opt for Shuka, Ice Beam T-Tar, or Shuka Ice Punch, but Ice Beam's kind of better if he's a Landorus check. So that makes the lure of Superpower even that much nicer in that sense. It also allows me to deal considerable damage to a Kyurem. If it's switched in on rocks, taken a round of sand and poison, it will die to a Superpower, provided it's not really bulky. So that's quite nice. Yeah, there's not too much to talk about else about this Hydreigon. Superpower again hits the Lop, which is pretty solid if I can catch it on a predict, but with T-Spikes up, Dark Pulse is doing a lot. Even if I get my Life Orb knocked off, that means I have better longevity versus with Ice Fang Roost Wars versus the Gliscor, which is a big threat to my team. Either like Roost, SD, Ice Fang, EQ could be a nice set on Gliscor. He could also opt to run a Baton Pass set, which could pose a big threat to my team if he does pass into Lop, as my primary check is a Coolfish, and Coolfish doesn't want to switch in on a +2 return. So having Taunt on this mon is just essential, because I can always go hard into Hydreigon if he ever brings in Gliscor, and I feel as though he will start SDing. So that is Hydreigon, pretty crucial member to the team, pretty important. Also allows me to check Manectric. Manectric can't 2-KO me with HP Ice Life Orb, which is pretty nice. Yeah, so Hydreigon's looking kind of nice here. Then we have my Mega Diancie. This spread allows me to avoid a high jump kick after a round of rocks from Diancie, from his Lopunny. Now, Mono's a pretty smart guy. I feel as though he will opt to run a Jolly Lop in this game with potential Baton Pass to avoid being revenge killed by Scarf Gothitelle Psychic, because Scarf Gothitelle with a timid nature does outspeed Adamant Lop. And while it would be nice for him to run Adamant Lop versus my team, which he can do because it outruns everything on my squad, just the fact that he has T-Tar in the back is just makes the allure of Baton Pass so nice versus a Goth. If I am Scarf Goth and I go for Psychic and he is Jolly Baton Pass Lopunny, he just gets a free switch into T-Tar, traps my Goth and removes it. So I feel like he is more than likely going to run Jolly. Mono is not the type of guy to overlook that sort of thing in my opinion. But I could be wrong. Nonetheless, this Diancie does take a high jump kick after one round of rocks, and can obviously merc it with the Moonblast. So it's a Stealth Rock 3 attack set. The nice thing about DNC in this matchup is that it does force switches. It forces him into his Reuniclus, his Toxapex, his Gliscor, or his Ferrothorn, all of which I can get up rocks on the switch. Psychic does over half to Toxapex, which is pretty solid. HP Fire obviously blowing back the Ferrothorn, and Moonblast is fairly reliable stab versus his team, hitting stuff like defensive Gliscor for a lot of damage. Even Spadef Gliscor takes around half, so I can pressure it with that. It's just a really solid mon versus his team. Outruns everything on his team barring Lop, which is really nice, or obviously relevant Scarfers. It's definitely nice to have DNC on the squad this week, and it's a mon that I felt could definitely put in the work. And the last final mon we have on the team is my mixed defensive but predominantly physically defensive Celesteela. Just a pretty stock standard Celesteela this week. Did have to run a set like this to avoid being really threatened by Mimikyu. My Spadef investment kind of eases the blow versus Kyurem's Ice Beam, but Kyurem's Ice Beam still does a ton. That thing is so strong. And even if he's like a lefties variant, it still does upwards of 35, 30 to, it's like 33 to like 37 or something from Timid Max Special Attack Ice Beam. Really strong mon, which may not seem like a lot, but if you consider the fact that Celesteela is not only a Kyurem check, but also a potential Lop answer, as well as a Tyranitar and Mimikyu answer, this Kyurem is definitely a problem. One of the issues with Celesteela is that it does kind of allow Reuniclus to come in. If Reuniclus is Magic Guard and it's at full, it can tank heavy slams provided it's physically defensive, which it should be. If it's Carmine, that is. So yeah, Celesteela, gonna have to be careful with that. Gonna have to play around his Reuniclus carefully if he does bring it. But this mon is actually quite fantastic in this matchup. If I can get a kill, I get a defense boost, meaning Lop and Tita have an even harder time taking me down. I live a +2 never-ending nightmare from Mimikyu after rocks with this range of, with this amount of health and defense, which is pretty nice. Although I do have multiple ways of beating Mimikyu in. Once this disguise is down, I have, and it's weakened with rocks and chip and toxic. I have Hydreigon and Diancie who can all take it on, as well as my defensive Suicune. So that is going to be the team. I have rambled on a lot, but a lot of tons of thought went into this team this week. I built about 5 different teams, all of which could have come to the game on the game day. But this is the team I went with for my reasons. And yeah, from Mono, I am expecting something like the team I was most expecting was Mega Lopunny, Tyranitar, Gliscor, Ferrothorn, Reuniclus, and Kyurem. I think that is a very dominant 6 against me. And obviously, you know, I've prepped accordingly, but we will see what he ends up bringing. We're going to jump into the match in just a sec. Alright guys, so we're back here with a match up against Mono, and he actually brought the team I was expecting. I did feel like Toxapex could make an appearance, as it does soak up T-Spikes and kind of check like a Suicune, sort of. But again, that would have really opened him up to more of a Landorus weakness. And I think Reuniclus is just really solid here in this matchup, and Ferrothorn is pretty nice as a Suicune answer, so as well as a Diancie answer if he's like Okaberry or something. But Shed Shell is more likely, considering I do have Goth on my squad. So yeah, this is the team I was expecting to see, and whenever that happens, it's always obviously nice knowing that you've prepped for their best 6, but at the same time it means that you know, they've brought their best 6, so it's always kind of not the greatest going into a match, but nonetheless I do think we can obviously win this with Kun and with the team that we have built. Suicune is looking like a pretty solid mon in this matchup. If we can get a sub up and hopefully get up T-Spikes early in order to poison the Kyurem. Obviously figuring out what sort of Kyurem set he's going to be is going to be important. If he's a fast sub-toxic Kyurem, that's going to be a real pain to play around, as that forces me to go into Kun on the Ice Beam and then pivot to Celesteela on the potential Toxic. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a pain to play around, but we're gonna have to scout that out during the match. I am just gonna lead off with my Hydreigon here. Now the reason I lead off with Hydreigon is for a couple of reasons. Like, if he does lead off with Kyurem like this, which is actually something I experienced in a lot of my mocks, people leading off with Kyurem versus my team, because I just lack sub Kyurem answers, honestly. Like, I have Diancie obviously, which revenges that offensively. I have Suicune who can switch in, but I don't function too well against a fast sub Kyurem who can sub on my defensive mons and Ice Beam my offense like Landorus, my Rocker. who could potentially be a rocker. He doesn't know if it's DNT or Landorus in this matchup, but him leading Kyurem is pretty risk-free on his part. So I feel like me leading Hydreigon is a pretty optimal lead. It also covers a lead Pharaoh, because I do have Taunt. It also covers a lead Tyranitar, like a Shuka Tyranitar, because I do have Life Orb Superpower. So all in all, it is the lead of choice. It does also force out his Kyurem. Now, the only reason he stays in with Kyurem here is if he expects me to not be Scarfed Hydreigon, and he himself is Scarfed Kyurem. So I'm going to make the switch out to Suicune. I want to scout. I want to have that early information. I'm going to switch out. If he switches out himself and I outspeed, that means he's not Scarfed Kyurem. If he stays in and fires off an Ice Beam or a Draco, Suicune will tank. And I don't expect him to go hard Toxic on this potential Draco coming his way from my own Hydreigon. So I'm going to make the switch out to my Suicune here, as he switches out after me, revealing that he's certainly not a Scarfed variant. He's going to bring in his T-Tar here. Now, I could have gone for the hard Protect here. I didn't feel as though... I was concerned about ban T-Tar going into this matchup, but I don't know, I didn't really feel like he'd bring it. He hasn't brought ban T-Tar all season. He's shown a tendency towards Stealth Rock's Tyranitar, like sometimes max attack, or like with like a Berry Lure and Stealth Rocks, or like a bulkier set. He actually hasn't brought Jelly Band all season, or any band for that matter. So I wasn't really expecting ban T-Tar, and I felt as though he may have opted to run Spike stacking, like Spikes Pharaoh plus Stealth Rock's T-Tar. But even if he was ban T-Tar, I do have a somewhat of a switch in the form of Qwilfish, although this turn I did expect him to either Taunt or go for the Stealth Rocks or the Toxic. As I am going to go out to my Qwilfish here, he's going to fire off a Stone Edge. Now, he misses his Stone Edge here. He is at -1, but as you will see from the following turn, this Stone Edge would have done a lot. He's actually Jolly Band T-Tar, so this is interesting. I am just going to take this opportunity to set up my T-Spikes. Now, this turn, had he hit that Stone Edge there, it would have done anywhere from low 40s to 47% or so, which meant that after a round of Sandstorm, I would have been at a range of health where I could have taken another one and set up my T-Spikes, although my Qwilfish would have been really, really weakened after that exchange. And you're going to see that miss, he actually gets some kind of hacks in his way in just a few turns, so it's going to kind of balance out in that sense. But Qwilfish is going to go for the Toxic Spikes this turn, and Tyranitar is actually going to outspeed, so he is Jolly. He's a very fast T-Tar, and he's banned from that damage. That does 44% off on that Stone Edge, as I'm going to get up my Stealth Rocks this turn. Now, because he's at -1, he is banned, but because he's at -1, my Celesteela, because I'm so defensive, and because he doesn't have Mimikyu, is kind of a pretty nice switch into this T-Tar here. It's a bit more expendable than if he had decided to bring Mimikyu. Obviously he does have Lop, but I do have a fairly healthy Qwilfish thanks to dodging that first Stone Edge. I do have Intimidate Landorus in the back, as well as Defensive Suicune and my DNC who can Little High Jump Kick after rocks, and I don't expect him to be packing Iron Tail in this matchup. So I'm going to switch out to Celesteela here. At -1 he will be only dealing about mid to low 30s percent. I have Leech Seed on this set as well, and Protect, so I can 1v1 this Tyranitar. So I'm going to go into my Celesteela here, and he is actually going to crit me with Stone Edge. So that does 82, so it would have done about 30, low 30s, but he gets a crit. So one of my great defensive checks on this team is now essentially out. But you know, that's kind of justice for missing his first edge, which would have really weakened my Qwilfish. So I guess at this point we're kind of even in that sense. I'm going to go for the Protect this turn. I want to stall out his Stone Edges if possible, because Stone Edge is his strongest way of hitting my team. So I'm going to go for the Protect here. I get my Leech, my Lefty's back. Now if I can get another Protect, I'm actually going to be out of range of a Stone Edge from this Tyranitar. As I mentioned, Stone Edge is only doing low 30s, so I'm actually going to get the double Protect as he does go for Edge here. Now had my Celesteela died there, my plan was to go into my Landorus, get the second Intimidate drop on him, so he would have actually been at -1, and then proceed to Rock Polish and Swords Dance up versus his team. His Kyurem, if he'd come in, would have taken a round of T-Spikes, so I would have Rock Polished the first turn and then knocked him out with Sky Strike if he stayed in. At 88% he was in range of Sky Strike, provided he was minimally bulk invested or just purely offensive Kyurem. Had he gone out into Gliscor, I could have just SD'd on that the next turn and blown him back with Sky Strike. But I am gonna get the double Protect here, and this is going to put me in a range of health where I do live a max roll Stone Edge. As you see, he gets a high roll there with the 35, as our Heavy Slam does a ton. So this puts Tyranitar in range of Scald from my Suicune after a round of T-Spikes the next time it comes in, which is really nice, as my Celesteela will live to see another day. He's actually going to switch out this turn into his Reuniclus on my Leech Seed and make the Leech play, because I felt as though he could have gone there out into his Gliscor to either set up rocks or take nothing from the Heavy Slam and have his Toxic Orb proc. But he decides to go into his Reuniclus, which is a really nice play as well, because this Mon takes on Celesteela quite nicely. It kind of sets up on it as well, which is pretty nice for Mono. So I'm going to switch out this turn, actually going to go out into my Celesteela. If he wants to fire off a Focus Blast or a Toxic predicting my Suicune to come in, my Diancie is a bit more expendable than these two. These two are really important Mons in this matchup. So going out to Diancie here allows me some valuable scouting information on his Reuniclus, and it also offers me a chance to get up my rocks. If I can get up my rocks, it's just going to really pressure his team that much more, and I do want that rocks plus poison chip versus his team. So I'm going to switch out here and preserve my Celesteela as kind of death fodder. He's going to go for the Carmine, so it's a bit scary. This is definitely Carmine confirmed Reuniclus, and it's pretty spooky, bit of a threat. I'm gonna fire off my rocks here, as I know I can take a Psychic or a Psyshock. He's gonna reveal the Psychic, so this is interesting. This means that my Suicune can actually take on this Reuniclus even easier, because he's gonna be firing off Psychics as opposed to Psyshocks. The kind of drawing card of Vinekune versus an opposing Carmine Sweeper is that it doesn't even need to take the hit, because it's subbing and protecting before the opponent's attacks can hit it. But in the off chance that I do have to take a Psychic without having a sub or clicking Protect, that will be easier than taking a boosted Psyshock, because I'll be Carmining alongside it. But it still does a ton. It does 65. I'm going to go out and sack my Celesteela, which will award me a free switch into my Landorus here. So because I don't know if Mono's scouted me or if he knows about Punishment Landorus, but that is a potential threat versus him. He may also be fearing the Sky Strike, and judging by Mono, like he's prepped for Sky Strike, because he does have stuff like T-Tar, Gliscor, who can dodge EQs, and as you'll see, he actually prepped very, very well for Sky Strike Lando. I'm going to go for Swords Dance here, because I do live a Psychic at +1. It does a lot to me, but I still live, and I can scare him out the next turn. He is actually going to go out to his Gliscor this turn, as I do set up a Swords Dance, so unless he's like a fast Gliscor, he won't be able to outspeed me here and taunt me, so I can just fire off my Rock Polish this turn. I am at a range of health, obviously, from full with my defense investment that I don't fear an Ice Fang from this Gliscor, so I don't have to worry about that. He's more than likely defensive too, the way he brought it in, so I'm not really going to fear like an offensive Life Orb Gliscor. He's shown to be Toxic Orb, so I don't have to worry about that. I go for my +2, so this is looking pretty solid. He's going to go for Ice Fang, and it does not kill my Landorus. Now here, I kind of contemplated going hard for another Swords Dance, predicting him to sack off his Tyranitar, which would have been a pretty worthy sack at this point in the match, scouting for the Supersonic Sky Strike. I really wanted to click Swords Dance, but if for some reason he stayed in and just attacked Landorus, feeling that he could revenge with Fake Out plus Quick Attack Lopunny, which I thought was also a pretty likely bring here, I'm better off getting some sort of result out of this exchange than just being taken out by a Gliscor with Ice Fang here and having nothing to show for it. At least if he does switch and bring back in Gliscor, I can either fire off a powerful +2 fly. If he's Protect, I can preserve Landorus for later on and go out into an according switch in. But nonetheless, I'm going to fire off a Supersonic Sky Strike here, as he is going to go for the Protect. So Mono came prepared for a double dancing Landorus, and it really worked out for him here, because he has Protect, Fly's essentially going to be useless. He's going to be able to block it every time and wall my Landorus. So this is bad news for Landorus. However, it is really, really good news for my Suicune, because the fact that he's Protect, he's Ice Fang, he's more than likely going to have Roost, and I believe he is Taunt, but I don't know that at this stage. He is walled by my Suicune, interestingly enough, as well as my Quillfish, funnily enough. So I am going to switch hard out into Suicune here, as he is going to go for the Ice Fang. We heal that off with lefties, so Suicune's in a pretty solid position to just get up a sub here. But he's going to go hard out to his Ferret, and I think this turn I do set up a sub, yep. And I am going to Protect this turn just to scout if he does have the Power Whip. For those of you who don't know, the way the Suicune works is with sub and protect, it stalls out the opponent's methods of breaking Suicune sub, which ultimately lead to Suicune 1v1ing the check. So that's essentially how Viking works. I'm going to protect here, I dodge, I burn out one of his power whips, I go for a Scald here just in case I can get a Scald burn, which will whittle this Pharaoh down. He hasn't revealed to be leftovers, so he's more than likely Shed Shell to prevent Goth from trapping it, which allows him to go hard into his T-Tar and Pursuit it. The fact that he's banned means that like Ban Pursuit would just obliterate Goth, so yeah, that's what I think at this point in time. Judging by the no item, the no lefties on his Pharaoh. I'm just gonna go for the sub this turn, expecting him to make some sort of non-power whip play, because protect was quite obvious there. Burning another power whip wouldn't have been pretty nice for him. Me going for sub this turn on his stealth rocks allows me to get up a free sub, which is nice, as this turn I can just protect, I believe, as I didn't want to take, I wanted to burn as many power whips as possible. Now he goes hard into Reuniclus here, and the fact that I have seen Psychic really make this a difficult situation for Reuniclus. I can Calm Mind in this thing's face, and because I am faster, one Psychic won't be able to break my sub because I will always be a Calm Mind ahead of his Reuniclus. So I'm going to start Calm Minding up. He's going to go for Psychic and fail to break my sub at +1. And this is pretty nice. I am going to Calm Mind up a second time, I believe, as he's going to go hard out into his T-Tar. And this is nice. Had I Scalded there, I would have got less out of that exchange, but he does have the Sand up, which is going to nullify my leftovers. But at the same time, we do outspeed this Tyranitar, so we don't have to worry too much about that threat. That is gone. No more bans. Stone Edge is flying at my defensive mons, on my bulky offense, I guess. This is going to allow him to bring in his Kyurem here, but he's going to be forced to take rocks and poison. So this is nice. The only way a Kyurem can really beat my variant of Suicune is if he's sub-toxic, and I'm in a situation where I can scout. I can just click protect turn 1, scout what he wants to go for. He's actually going to reveal Dragon Pulse, so he shows Dragon Pulse and he fails to show leftovers. So this is interesting. He could be a Scarfed variant of Kyurem, which I felt was possible because Scarfed Flash Cannon or Scarfed Iron Head is a nice revenger for Diancie. It's also a nice revenger for Scarfed Landorus, and considering I'd shown the trend of bringing Scarfed Landorus 2 weeks in a row, I think he may have opted to run Scarfed Kyurem to check that. Also is a pretty nice check to non-Scarfed Hydreigon, so wouldn't be surprised to see a Scarfed Kyurem in this bring from Mono, but either way, going for another sub guarantees that I will be able to come out of this with a sub up, because the only way he can possibly break my sub is if he's Specs and he gets a 50-50 roll. So Specs, Timid Specs Kyurem, the damage rolls on my Suicune at +2 is 23 to 27.4%. So he has essentially a 50-50 chance of breaking my sub, and the likelihood of him being Specs Kyurem is kind of low, but at the same time I don't have fantastic switch-ins to Kyurem, so he just as easily could be Specs. But at this point I'm not certain about that. I have to kind of scout. I think this turn I do protect. No, I just go for a Scald in case he wanted to. No, I go for Calm Mind this turn. Sorry, in case because I didn't think this thing would be Specs, and if he wasn't Specs, he couldn't have broken my sub there. I could have protected the next turn and then subbed as his second Dragon Pulse broke my sub and been in a really fantastic spot. But his Dragon Pulse is going to break my sub, revealing that he is guaranteed to be a Specs Kyurem. As my Calm Mind is going to put me at a range where he can no longer break my sub, and he's going to switch out to Ferrothorn this turn on my protect. So that was a really nice play on his part. He keeps Kyurem at a range of health where it can switch in one more time on rocks. It's not necessarily like a sack if he can bring it in safely, but if he switches it in, it's going to die because it will take rocks and then the residual poison at the end of the turn. But if he can get like a free switch into it, it can fire off a Specs hit, so I can definitely respect preserving his Kyurem there. As I do go for the protect this turn, probably could have subbed there, but going for a protect with Suicune is the safest way to play it. This is my win con. Like, I'm not trying to get crit there by a potential crit Dragon Pulse and lose my win con. Keeping Suicune at the highest amount of health is really important, especially considering that my lock checks are kind of low. Like, Celesteal is gone now because of the crit, and Qwilfish is still around, although it would be gone if he hit his first edge after taking another round of rocks. So my lop checks are pretty low, so keeping Suicune healthy is quite essential. He's going to go into his Ferrothorn here, as I think this turn I do just go for a Protect, as he reveals the Power Whip. He doesn't reveal, he's already shown the Power Whip. This turn I think I do sub as he Power Whips again, and this is nice because like I do have Protect and sub of course, and I can kind of stall out his Power Whips, but he actually reveals Protect on himself, so he got me there with that Protect, as his Power Whip is going to break my sub, and this is just going to be a bit of back and forth. I'm trying to stall out his PP on his Power Whip, and then he reveals Knockoff, so this is interesting. Knockoff won't break my sub, but it is a nice way of catching my Suicune on a turn that I don't sub up. He can knock off my lefties. This is not a situation I really want to stay in with my Coon. If I can burn this Pharaoh, then I will win this exchange quicker. But my main aim here is just wearing down his Power Whip PP with Suicune. I'm going to switch out here into my Hydreigon, as he has shown the knockoff, and if he knocks off my Hydreigon, that it kind of helps in the sense that I have an easier time versus Gliscor because I'm not taking the Life Orb recoil, and my Dark Pulses are still going to be doing a decent job because Gliscor's Spadef is kind of bad unless invested. So he's going to go for Power with this turn, and now he's going to make the switch out into his Kyurem, I guess scouting for fire coverage on my Hydreigon. I have revealed Life Orb, and he knows nothing else about my spread other than the fact that I'm Life Orb, so he doesn't know that I'm not invested in special attack at this point, which is good. He's gonna bring in his Lopunny here, and I'm gonna kind of have to sack off my Landorus here, as I don't want to bring my Coolfish in and take a hit because then it will die to the following hit. If I can bring it in clean on the Lop, I can fire off a Waterfall. But the fact that I got that Intimidate drop means that my Suicune will actually be able to fire off a Scald here and be in a really nice spot. I will only take 23 from the return, and I'll be at a range of health after lefties and a Protect where I could take like a high jump kick from this -1 Lop. So getting this Scald damage off on this Coolfish is crucial, because after Poison he's now at a range of health where he won't be able to take a Waterfall plus Helmet damage from my Coolfish. That's really nice. I can go for Protect here, get my Suicune to a higher amount of health, and if he wants to stay in the next turn, I can just sack off my Coolfish, meaning this Lopunny will go down to recoil damage from the Helmet plus Poison. He also won't be able to kill my Coolfish because he'll be at -2, so I'll be able to keep that around to taunt his Reuniclus and his Ferrothorn, as well as take on his Gliscor because it doesn't have EQ. But yeah, he's going to switch out this turn, go into his Ferrothorn, as I believe I do go for Protect. I really don't lose much by just protecting here because it does give me more lefties back, and it does stall out more PP from this Ferrothorn. This turn I can just go into my Hydreigon, as if he wants to knock off, I'm okay with that. It's also stalling out Power Whip PP, as this turn I can just go for the Roost. Now he makes the play of going out into his Gliscor this turn, as I can just fire off a Taunt here. If he was SD, I don't know that he's Taunt at this point in the game. I've only seen Roost and Ice Fang, so and Protect, of course. So I don't know if he's actually like a Swords Dance variant, or if he's Taunt of his own. He actually reveals to be Taunt this turn, as my Taunt stops his Taunt from working, and my Dark Pulse is going to do over half. So this is really nice. Because we are defensive, we take only 28% from that Ice Fang. So bulky Hydra coming through. His Gliscor is going to be at a range of health, where it's above dying from Dark Pulse, so I'm actually just going to Roost up this turn, as he's just going to start Ice Fang. We're going to get into a bit of a Dark Pulse Ice Fang exchange. I do want to taunt him here to prevent him from taunting me, and not being able to remain at a healthy amount for his Reuniclus and his Ferrothorn. But his Ice Fangs aren't doing too much. I can kind of take him on here with Dark Pulse and Taunt, although his Ice Fangs are wearing me down. Because I do have the Life Orb, that is kind of costing me, because that 10% chip is like wearing me down in conjunction with his Ice Fangs, whereas if I didn't have the Life Orb, if it had already been knocked off by Ferrothorn, I'd still be 3-hit KOing this Gliscor with Dark Pulse, but I wouldn't be taking that 10% each turn. One thing to notice here, like this Gliscor is checked by my Suicune. Every time I bring this in, like every time I bring Coon in on this Gliscor, it's forced to go out into Ferrothorn and potentially get Skull Burnt, so that's pretty nice. But I do get a crit there with I get a crit there with Dark Pulse that turn, as I think it was here. Yeah, I get a crit on his Gliscor here, as that's going to leave both of us quite low, as I'm going to be taking the recoil and he's going to be hitting me with the Ice Fang. So that was unfortunate, but you're going to see I'm going to roost this turn. I didn't want my Hydreigon to take another round of leftovers of Life Orb, and then come in on rocks and be really at a point where I can't take anything from the Ferrothorn. So I wanted to roost up. No reason to play like recklessly at this point after playing so well around his Gliscor with my Hydreigon. I'm just going to weaken it again with the Dark Pulse, as he's going to fire off the Ice Fang this turn. And now his Gliscor is actually at a range of health where it will die to another Dark Pulse, but I choose to roost up, as I did feel like he would attack me there with the Ice Fang, expecting my taunt, but Mono makes a really good play and goes to the roost. So I'm not too worried about this Gliscor, because I do have my own Suicune in the back, and if I can taunt this Gliscor, I know my Suicune can get up a sub, or even just threaten the possibility of subbing versus this Gliscor and just start firing off Scalds. As his Ice Fang is going to do negligible damage to the Coon, I can just start firing off a Scald here and potentially burn his Ferrothorn, which we do. So we finally get a burn on the Ferro, which is nice. This is just going to speed up the inevitable of this Ferro getting worn down by the Suicune, as his Power Whips are getting really low now. I think he only had 2 left at this point. I believe he only had 2 left, so he's going to switch out to Reuniclus on this turn, as I do go for the sub. So I don't know if he'd run out. I kind of forget if he'd run out of Power Whips by that point. I think he may have. Not too sure. Have to listen to his side on that. But I do get a sub up here with my Coon, as he brings in his Reuniclus. Now I'm going to Calm Mind up here, as I don't want Psychic to break my sub, and then he decides to Calm Mind up himself. So at this point, we'd both realized it was going to come down to a Calm Mind war. Although obviously, because I am Vinekune, I do have an advantage, as I can stall out his Psychic PP. We're going to be at +6, so the fact that I have Sub and Protect really gives me the advantage in a Calm Mind war. It means the Suicune's going to be way less vulnerable to getting critted. Calm Mind wars often comes down to who gets crit first, and the fact that I have Sub and Protect mean that I'm way more unlikely to get crit, as he has to actually break my sub in the first place. And every time he attacks me, he versus my Suicune has 8 Psychics essentially, because of pressure halving the PP, the total PP, and he's already fired off. He's already used up one of those Psychics earlier on in the game. I think he's already used one. He may have used more, but I think it was only 1 at this point. So he only really has 7 left. And if he has Focus Blast as his coverage move, he has to not only hit, but he has to try and break my sub with Focus Blast, and he only has 4 of those, I believe. So I think it's got 8 PP. I could be wrong there, but either way, Suicune's winning this exchange. But Suicune is winning this exchange in the long run. But he could also, depending on how long it takes me to get a crit, use up a lot of my Scalds. So that's also a factor. If I stall out Focus Blasts from his Reuniclus, my Hydreigon 1v1s this Reuniclus, I can just taunt it and click Dark Pulse until it dies, basically. I also have my Coolfish in the back to take on the Lop. As you guys can tell, I do get the crit on the first Scald, so that is unfortunate for Mono. It does, all it really did was speed up the inevitable, as Suicune wasn't losing to a Reuniclus. Even if none of my Scalds killed it, he wasted all his Psychics versus my Suicune, and my Hydreigon would be able to take it on after all its Focus Blast had been depleted. If my Suicune had somehow died in this exchange, again I had Coolfish to take on the Lopunny, and my Hydreigon beat the last 2 members of his team, as did my Diancie, because I am HP Fire Diancie, which I kill his Shed Shell Ferrothorn from that range of health, and his Ice Fang Gliscor, which can't kill my Diancie, and I 2-KO him with Moonblast from full. So that is essentially going to be the game. He's going to bring in Lopunny here, as I will just be able to go for the Scald and take him out, and Suicune is kind of just going to wrap up this game. Although this is a 4-0, it's definitely, it was definitely a closer game than the score suggested. Mono played this really well, and he brought some really good sets. Like Bandita was just fantastic versus me. Specs Curum was just a really good bring because I have very limited answers to that. Carmine Uniclus was amazing versus me, hence why I was pressured into bringing this Suicune set. The Gliscor was a really interesting set. Whilst it was ineffective against the majority of my team, it fulfilled its purpose, which was to check the Double Dance Landorus. So props to Mono for doing that. He really read the threats and brought a team that could check my biggest threats on my team. Although he, we were speaking about it after the game, and he acknowledged that he opened himself up to a weakness to this sort of Suicune as a result of over prepping for Landorus and stuff like Celesteela. And that's just what happens in matchups like this, where you have big threats like Landorus that you need to prepare for. You kind of tend to sleep on underrated or unexpected sets like Suicune. I also did think he wouldn't prep as heavily for Suicune, like I mentioned in the builder, because he had stuff like Reuniclus, Ferrothorn, Toxapex, Curum, all of whom take advantage of Suicune. Traditionally, like Carmine Rescue, they all take on with like Psyshock, Reuniclus, Power Whip on the Ferrothorn. So yeah, I was happy that the Suicune set worked out, and I feel as though it was a good bring in this matchup. But yeah, I do want to just obviously give props to my opponent Monotooi for a very good game and some very good sets. I don't think there was much he could have done differently here. Like he played a great game, and I think it was very close, closer than the 4-0 suggests. But yeah, my Hydreigon set just stopped a lot of his bulkier mons like Gliscor, and Suicune was able to check his other bulk. But yeah, that was basically it. Obviously Diancie didn't get to put in too much work here, but rocks were pretty essential, weakening stuff like the Curum, and yeah, it's just kind of nice putting things in range of Coon. But that was my match for week 4 versus Monotooi. Definitely a fun match. I recommend you go and check out his channel if you guys aren't already subbed, and go and see his side of the match. His team is getting strong with each free agent trade he makes, and I do think it's very likely that I will face Mono in the playoffs. If I don't see Mono not making playoffs with this team. He's already had some big wins this season, and I don't think it's possible that Mono doesn't make playoffs. With the caliber of player that he is, plus the team he's drafted and the way he's used stuff like Tyranitar and Mimikyu so far, I'm sure we'll face again in playoffs, so that'll definitely be interesting going round 2 there. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, let me know in the comments and drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next time.